Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the Roadmaster Rear Anti-Sway Bar. The biggest reason why people want to install a rear anti-sway bar on their motorhome is because they're getting a lot of top-end sway. Most of these motorhomes are going to come with a rear anti-sway bar already installed. This is going to be an additional one to help reduce the amount of sway when you're headed down the road. Now there's a couple of different things that are going to cause sway. A lot of times it's the wind on the road, other trucks passing you, even smaller cars passing you can cause a little bit of sway to start, and just the body roll in general makes driving an RV very uncomfortable. I've just driven this one around the lot a couple of times, and it's pretty uneasy with the original one on. And the fact of the matter is the suspension is designed to be soft for comfort, but where that hurts you is that the suspension is not rigid enough to stop any of that sway from happening. The body roll can actually give you an uneasy feeling when it comes to steering or having control when going down the highway. Now, what I always recommend to my friends and family that have motorhomes, and just people that I meet out at campsites and different things like that, they always ask, how can I eliminate body roll? Well, with something this big, it is going to be near impossible to eliminate body roll because it's so heavy. But the things that you can do is put a rear anti-sway bar on. I also recommend putting a front anti-sway bar on. Although this RV, I think, would be one exception. There's not too bad a sway up on the front. It would help to contribute with the whole body roll as an entire entity. But the other things I also recommend is putting a set of sumo springs on the back and putting a set of sumo springs on the front. And what the sumo springs are designed to do is they'll replace your factory jounce bumpers. Your factory jounce bumpers are very, very small on especially something this big. They really don't do anything. They essentially stop your frame from hitting your axle. But other than that, they're not really helping with body roll at all. With that being said too, they're also too soft. The sumo springs, what they're designed to do, they're going to be much taller. They'll fill the gap. They will be engaged all the time, and they're progressive. So as they squish down, when you start to get body roll, they get harder and harder, and they'll stop it. And adding a set of those on the rear and the front is going to help you in the long run. That's the ultimate kit, is front and rear anti-sway bars and sumo springs on the front and rear. So what we're going to do before we get the new sway bar on is we're going to take it over a test course, take a couple of turns with it, and I'll tell you kind of how I'm feeling, and probably a lot like you're feeling with the old sway bar, and then we'll add our new one and come back and show you those results. So this is kind of like one of the turns I was talking about. Probably not as fast as a turn that you normally would make, but you can feel the whole rig leaning to one side, and then it makes it worse yet if you hit something while you're turning. I've had a couple of situations here where just driving a motorhome around the lot, I feel like the whole rig's just going to tip over when I hit something while I'm turning. We're going to start by going over some of our speed bumps here. This is going to be an extreme example of the sway that you can get from a motorhome like this. And you can see just by looking at the front window that we've got a lot of side-to-side movement. Not so much when we hit something with the front, but when we hit something with the rear, it sways a lot worse because there's a lot more weight back there too, and we've got a lot of tail behind the rear axle, and that is not helping us. So you can see side to side, we're moving, well, not even fast enough for the speedometer to pick up, but this is a very controlled, and it's still scary to have something this big moving side to side. Just to show you a quick comparison underneath our motorhome, this is a new one we installed, and this is a factory one. The factory one is a little bit thicker than the new one we installed, but the reason why you're adding a anti-sway bar and not replacing is because this one's still going to help us with it being installed. We're just adding another one to get more support. Now, to get this kit installed, it will come with all the hardware that you need. You're not going to have to drill any holes. You'll use 2 factory bolts on either side of the chassis to be able to get our first brackets mounted up, and then everything else will come in your kit as far as hardware to get it in place. Now that we've gone over some of those details, let's go ahead and show you how we did it. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll want to relax the suspension on the rear axle of your vehicle. What we did was we used our lifts here at work, But what you can do is you can lift up, if you have a hitch, you can put a jack underneath the hitch and lift up on the hitch to relax that suspension. Essentially, you just want the tires barely off the ground to be able to get in there. What it's going to do is it'll relax that leaf spring on the back axle so that it gets out of the way of the 2 holes we're going to have to use to mount some bracketry up. On the inside of your wheel well, you'll see the 2 bolts that we'll have to remove. There will be 4 total, but we're going to be using the 2 lower ones. So if you look in here, you can see these 4 bolts. We're going to be using this one and that one to be able to get our brackets attached. So we'll just have to pull those out, put our bracket on, and put them back in. And we'll take a 21mm socket, and we're going to remove those 2 bolts. And we'll take our bracket, and we're essentially going to want to slide it underneath the release spring, and then slide our 2 bolts back through the holes in the frame. We'll take our bracket, slide it up into place. And we could take the 2 factory tang nuts. They'll have this little tab on them that basically just helps them from spinning on the back. And we'll put those on the other side of our bolts. Now once you get these started hand tight, you can go outside in the wheel well again and tighten them the rest of the way with a socket, because that's what this tang is designed to do. It's designed to catch either this frame rail or the bottom of the frame rail, and it'll hold it in place while you tighten and torque the bolts from the other side. Now we're going to need to torque these 2 bolts on either side to the specifications and the instructions. I will tell you it is going to be much easier to torque it from underneath than it is in the wheel well itself. Now we're going to take a 1 5/16" socket to get our U-bolt nuts here removed. We'll have to take all 4 of them off, hold this plate up, and then put one of our brackets on, and then put the nuts back on. Now on your inner nuts, they are going to be a little closer to the wheel, so I had to use an extension to be able to get past the wheel because our gun is too big to be able to fit next to the tire. Now when you get down to loosening the last nut, I like to leave 1 threaded on here so it holds the plate on. There we go. Take this one off. What we can do, if we do this correctly, we can take our bracket, and you're going to want it to sit just like this. This tab with all the holes in it is going to face backwards, and you want this slice, this cutout section, to be right next to the tire. We'll take these, slide it up to help hold that plate on. So ours is kind of wedged at an angle, so going to end up helping us. Slide the bracket up, and we just need to get 1 nut started on here. That'll help hold everything up and in place. Now when threading these nuts back on, what I like to do is I like to take the socket and spin them on as far as I can go by hand, because it really helps you get the threads all correct. Because these are U-bolts, anytime you're tightening U-bolts, you want to tighten them alternating between the four so that you get even pressure. Otherwise you'll have about an inch sticking out here and you'll have no threads exposed here. So that's why I help to prevent that by threading them in all the way in by hand. And look at the threads, they're all about at the end here. The other thing that you want to do when you're doing this is you look at the top of your leaf spring pack and you want to make sure that loop is sitting in the correct spot on the perch that's on top of the leaf springs. Just some mental notes to keep in mind when you're tightening these up. But now we'll go ahead and snug them up. Again, making sure we are providing even pressure to all of them. Now once you get those snugged up, we'll come over to the driver's side and repeat that same process. Now we're going to take our brackets, they're going to look like this. We'll hang them from here, put them on the lower bolt hole, slide our bolt through, and then thread on a nylon lock nut. Now we'll take a 15/16 socket and wrench and tighten this hardware down. Now we'll torque these to the specifications in your instructions. Now with an extra set of hands, it makes it a lot easier to lift this anti-sway bar up into place and slide it between these two brackets. And when we mount this up, we're going to be using the bottom hole, because then when we swing it up into place, it'll mount up perfect, straight in line with the brackets. And the way that you want this curve to face is when you have it, when it's aiming towards the pumpkin here in the back, the differential. You want the Roadmaster sticker to be right side up, but this is also curved so that it doesn't hit this differential. So just so you know which orientation to put it in. And we'll tighten and torque these to the specifications in the instructions. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to test fit these first, because you're going to have to put some lubrication in here that comes in your kit. But what we found doing these in our shop is that you almost always put these in the wrong place. So we like to throw these bushings on and then roll the bar up into place of where it would be attached to. Slide it over and just kind of mock it up so you know about where it's going to be. Now what we'll do is we decided we're going to take one, go ahead and bolt it up without any lubrication on it first. Then we'll get our other one lubricated and pull this one back off and get this one lubricated. Now we're going to take some of this grease and smear it on the inside of our bushing. And this stuff is really sticky, that's why we didn't want to have to put it on, and then typically you have to adjust it, so we didn't want to have to do it more than once, because otherwise it gets your bar all dirty. Open it up and slide it on. And the hardware combination we're using for this is a bolt and a washer down to the top. And then we use a washer and a nut on the bottom. With this side bolted up, we can now take this other side back off, grease that up, and then come back and tighten and torque all the bolts to the specifications and the instructions. Once you torque everything down, that's going to do it for installation. Now, after we have our rear sway bar installed, our new one, I can definitely tell you it does not 100% eliminate the sway back and forth, but I can tell you it recenters a lot faster. You don't feel much of the wishy-washy. It feels more like a normal vehicle when you're driving and you hit a bump. It still rocks back and forth, but it's not the extreme rocking back and forth. And once it gets control, it stops pretty soon thereafter. Now going over these speed bumps again, we're hitting one at a time. Again, the swaying is not nearly as bad as it was before, but more so, I can feel it's a lot more controlled in the back. Now there are other benefits that you can do to your vehicle, as we've already said, that you can add a set of sumo springs on the back, you can add anti-sway bars to the front, but honestly with this rig, the front feels pretty solid. It's mainly the rear that has so much of that flex back and forth, but it's definitely made an improvement. Again, with as heavy as these rigs are on the top end, it is near impossible to eliminate all sway, because after all, a little bit of sway is good because it means that your suspension has a little bit of flex in it. Well guys, hopefully this video was able to show you why the Roadmaster Rear Anti-Sway Bar is right for you and your 2022 Tiffin motorhome.